In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, I have a special guest. And in this episode, we are going to discuss the strengths of Kel'el Ware. And is he still worth a lottery pick or even a first round pick, despite his lack of production? Stay tuned. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I am your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board and the founder of NBA Draft Junkies. And my guest today, I call him NBA Draft Mikey V, but he is Michael Visenberg from Pro Insight. And what exactly is your role at Pro Insight? I know you're like the man there and all that, but what exactly is your role there?
It's called Basketball Information Specialist, and basically I'm just trying to know as much as I possibly can about basketball prospects. And so it's scouting, it's media, it's we have a giant database full of information on players, and I'm just trying to get as much of a picture of a player as possible.
And you definitely have a lot of insight. That's why I have you on. But before we get into that, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That is PrizePicks.com. Promo code Locked On. All right, Kel'el Ware. So I'll give you my thoughts. Coming into the season, I had him as a lottery pick. I was definitely a Ware over Derek Lively guy. I thought that he was going to be a little bit more productive. Well, I shouldn't say a little bit more. I thought he was going to be a lot more productive than he has been. And he's not playing like I thought. He's actually not even starting. And I wanted to get your insight because you are there in Oregon and you've been around him from, was it McDonald's? Or no, Hoop Summit?
I was Nike Hoop Summit. Yes, sir.
Hoop Summit. I know you were very, very high on him coming into the season. So, in your opinion, why is he not playing as much as I would assume most people thought he would?
I think there is a very good reason for that. And, people look at a player like Kel'el Ware and see him as, a fantastic physical tools, athletic tools, his shooting touch. He has a lot going for him. The big issue seems to be that Oregon right now has another former five-star center who is finally healthy this year in N'Faly Dante, who's playing really, really well. And they did start off the year trying to get him minutes. Like, I think there were a lot of factors. There were tons of injuries with Oregon early on. They were just trying to find the right kind of fit with the roster. They usually go small at the 4. So when they did play Nathan Biddle against Arizona, but for the most part, they've been playing Quincy Guerrier, which the 4 has been by far his best position. Just to try and maybe get like a little more shooting on the floor, and a little more defensive versatility, as the 3 7-footers that they have on the roster all are best at the center position. So yeah, that was definitely part of it. And then I think with Ware, he did have some injuries early on, and he had some things that he really needed to learn as a basketball player, like just in terms of those raw fundamentals, just, being more consistent in terms of box outs. And I think some players need to learn how to play hard, need to learn, when to kind of, take those moments, try and go for that block on defense. And with the other thing with Kel'el is his foul rate is surprisingly low for a big man, just in general.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the foul rate, the rebound rate, you want to see him out there getting some fouls and being able to get into foul trouble now that Oregon has all their players back. So yeah, I think he had some fundamentals that he needed to work on. And then he has some players in front of him who've been playing really well.
I guess in a sense, I kind of from the old school, right? Back in, it makes me sound really old, but recently, I mean, there were times, Marvin Williams comes to mind, but recently you're starting to see guys end up getting drafted strictly off the promise and the potential outside of their production. And, this is a case where if he ends up going first round, he's playing 20 minutes a game, doesn't start, and he is, I mean, was the average like 8 points and 4 rebounds or something like that. 8 points, 4.5 rebounds, 1.6 blocks in 20 minutes is pretty good.
Yeah.
Now coming into the season, I read some of my notes. I had him, and this is, I mean, totally before he played a college game. I had him, just my notes: 7-footer, excellent size and length, massive wingspan, good touch around the basket, vertical lob threat. He's agile. Thought he had a pretty strong lower frame, good shoulders, finishes around the rim, quick second jump, good rebounder, good hands, crashes the offensive glass, and can run the floor. My concerns were he had no left hand, no post moves, and I felt like he did have promise as a shooter, but I felt like the shooting wasn't consistent. And my biggest concern was the motor doesn't always run. So when I talked to a scout that was really familiar with him, one of the things that he mentioned was he felt like the motor is inconsistent. And he said even playing high school ball with Nick Smith, his motor wasn't always hot because he felt like if he wasn't getting touches down, every few trips down the floor, his motor didn't run.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into that, like, what are your thoughts on like my notes? Is there anything like you totally agree with or totally disagree with? And then what are your thoughts on the motor?
I think you nailed a lot of like what the good and the things to worry about with Kel'el. Like I think the motor is very hit and miss. Like, sometimes he just doesn't play with the energy, you would really want from him. Especially like in those limited minutes where, he knows he has a certain amount of time where he can really go out and run. It seems like he just at times isn't even in the position to get the ball. Much like, you kind of need to work for it. Like a game where that really stood out was Houston, where he took one field goal the entire game and got to the foul line, I think once, for 2 free throws. But yeah, he like just a lot of times wasn't even in the vicinity of the ball or in good position. And I think some of that is strength.
Yeah.
He definitely needs to add that. And just finding the way to get in those good spots, like, getting downhill, getting to be that lob threat. He's still kind of figuring that out. And I think still kind of figuring out positioning on the floor, floats on the perimeter a lot. Needs to recognize matchups at times also. Like the game against UCLA, I remember he was being guarded by Tiger Campbell and he was at the 3-point line. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
So yeah, there just have been those instances where he started off like I felt like his first 3 games, he looked really good. He was really active, and then it's been pretty hit and miss since then. And a lot of the times it's just him going through periods where he's not really doing like a ton on the floor. He's not setting those screens. He's not getting in position to get the ball. So yeah, of course you'd like to see that become a little more consistent. But my big thing with him is when you have that size, you have the touch, and you have the athleticism, the learning curve can usually kind of shrink. So that I would say is the ultimate hope. And I think that's a huge part of why he still is considered to be the level of draft prospect that he is.
Yeah, I have so many more questions for you. When we return, I want to get your thoughts on, was Oregon the best fit for him? But before that, I want to talk to the audience about PrizePicks. And if you're wondering what PrizePicks is, you just pick 2 to 6 players and you decide if they will score more or less than their PrizePicks projection. You can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. There is no competing against other people. It is just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport you want to watch: NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, WNBA. They even have cricket. And the entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals, and it is currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com and sign up and play daily fantasy sports. If you are a first-time user, you can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you 50. If you deposit 100, PrizePicks will give you 100. But do not forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for the instant deposit match up to $100. Once again, you're listening to the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. This is your host, Rafael Barlowe, with Michael Visenberg. I call him NBA Draft Mikey V. That is his Twitter handle. And we're talking about Kel'el Ware, somebody that he is very familiar with. He is a big Oregon fan. He also is a basketball information specialist. He knows a lot about every prospect. And when I say he knows a lot about prospects, I'm not talking about the NBA draft. He goes to like middle school tournaments. Like he knows middle schoolers and 8th graders and I mean, just it's a lot of information. It's a lot of information. I don't know how you do it. I mean, I may go 11th grade, 12th grade, and then college. The middle school, that's a whole different beast there. All right, so let's talk about Ware choosing the University of Oregon. And this is probably like the older me talking, right? If I were 18 or 19 or whatever, I'm pretty sure when I was choosing a school, I'd be choosing it off of how well my visit went and, maybe in this day and age, the NIL and whoever the coach that I had the best relationship with. But I feel like if you're a big, you need to go to a situation where you're going to get developmental minutes, especially if in his case, if you're a McDonald's All-American. You want to go somewhere where you're going to where you're going to be the man in a sense, and somewhere that has very, very good guard play to where you're going to get plenty of touches. And even if it's just not touches, you have a point guard that can make a post-entry pass or throw a lob or whatever. And just on the outside looking in, not saying Oregon's guard play is bad. I know there's been some injuries, but the situation where he's going to a team that already had a starting center, to me, from the jump, I thought that was pretty weird. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that he probably assumed that the starting center might not be back. I think he also came in during a time where they had a point guard prospect at one point that he thought he was maybe going to be playing with as well. Those are 2 factors that, just I don't think you necessarily would know at the time. But we're also seeing like, a guy who is playing with a point guard who you would think like would meet all that criteria in a Dembona has had his own struggles as well.
Yep.
So yeah, like you never know, man. It's just fit is it's not really something you can always predict. But yeah, in terms of if Oregon was the best possible fit for him, I'm sure there would be schools that would have given him more time, more touches, had shooting more conducive to give him the spacing necessary that Oregon has not had for the most part this season. But yeah, I think considering My other thing is that I don't know, this could have changed at a time, but I remember looking over a lot of past NBA centers and how they played early on in college.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot of them a lot of time.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you have obviously the Karl Anthony Towns and the Anthony Davises, and, you know, if he considers himself a center. And, you know, you have some of those players like DeMarcus Cousins, like right away, you know, the super talented ones right off the bat.
Yep.
But it can take some time. And I remember with some centers, like it would be that kind of like middle of the season flip. Now I think with Kel'el that could certainly happen also. But the other thing I see is that a lot of people have talked about how early on he was playing some power forward, but that hasn't happened for quite a while.
Yeah.
So he's kind of just been sharing minutes. Now, do I think he could play power forward at Oregon as well as some of the other options? Yes. I think he's like, if you kind of look at it, how everything's gone so far, like you could argue he's kind of been like their third, like kind of option to an extent. Yeah, I just think that I think people had maybe higher expectations for him than they should have. And I'm not sure how much of that is on him, and I'm not sure how much of that is on Oregon.
Now, do you think that is fair? I do feel like, you know, if you are McDonald's All-American, and especially if you're like a 7-footer and you show shooting potential and a lot of upside, there's going to be a lot of talk about you going to the NBA draft. And I think as the media, as a person that's part of the media, and I guess I can be part of the blame for it too, especially when I have to do a podcast 5 times a week. I need content to talk about. And coming into the season, I talked about him and Lively a lot. While I didn't talk a lot about Noah Clowney, who's playing really well, who I think could end up being drafted ahead of them. But I also feel like as a member of the media, we can put extra expectations on a kid. And that's something that I'm really kind of torn about, right? If I'm like, this kid is raw, but I think that he has the potential to be a first-round pick, then it's like if he doesn't show numbers right away, he can end up being disappointed. And then I also feel in the case of like high school rankings, there are times where players can be ranked really, really high. And then the higher they're ranked, the higher they end up being on draft boards. And now you put these expectations on, especially with bigs, to where they really kind of look like failures in a sense if they don't come in and start and be a one and done and average a double-double. So with all that being said, if you were advising Ware, what is your move after the season is over? Do you return to school? Or do you, I mean, obviously you probably would test the waters, but like, do you need a certain guarantee before you say, okay, I'm leaving?
Obviously, I think you would want a first-round guarantee.
Is there a
I would
range?
say,
Is there a range? Like,
no, I would just say first round. Yeah.
okay.
Like, to me, that seems good. You have the 4-year guarantee. You would like to have your choice of team, of course, but I think as we see, like, I think a lot of the picks near the end of the first round have been traded to teams that might not necessarily be contenders. So you could possibly even get some early minutes there, or be in a situation where they, want to play young players. But yeah, like, I don't know, man. I'm always a big like player's choice kind of person.
Yep.
So yeah, if I were consulting for him, I would say do whatever you feel is best for you.
But remember, he's like 18 or 19.
He is.
So
Yeah,
sometimes they need.
He turns 19 on April 20th. I know that he's very young, and I'm sure he has people around him who are advising him as well. I know his mom retweets everything about him, so she's been a very big part there. But yeah, I just I don't know, man. It's really tough to advise, and I think just keep all of his options open.
Yeah, I think
Um,
the
yeah.
NIL is a game changer, and so I think you definitely want a guarantee, a first round guarantee, but then it's like I would say at 20, anything else you're like okay, it can get tricky because
Yeah.
it can get tricky. Then you could end up falling second round, which I think he'd be considered a prospect that would still get a guaranteed contract as a second round pick. But I would
Okay.
say in the top 20, that's where I would feel like if everybody says I'm top 20, which you can take that with a grain of salt, I'd feel a little bit comfortable. But if they're like anywhere from 20 to 30, that's very risky, especially when you consider that. I mean, Oregon is a school that has money. There's NIL money. There is probably more playing time next year at
For sure.
Oregon.
Yeah.
And
Would think Dante's gone.
yeah, so that would be something that I would definitely consider. But
Yeah.
if I were a betting man, if I had to put money on it, I imagine he would go to the NBA draft. All right, when we return, I want to talk about your thoughts on him as an NBA prospect, his best case scenario, and what are his strengths. But I got to talk to you about Built Bar, because if you are looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and the calories, then you have to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays. It is the start of the year. And I know a lot of people want to eat healthier, but if you want to eat healthier and you don't want to compromise the taste, then you got to try a Built Bar, because with Built Bars, healthy is actually tasty. And what makes Built Bar so good is that they are covered with 100% real chocolate, and they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I don't know how they do it, but they find a way to make this protein bar taste like a candy bar. It's only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. But the cool thing in 2023 is that before, and we've been talking about Built Bars ever since I've been on the Locked On Network, you had to go to built.com. But now you can get a Built Bar at Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. You can go get one at Walmart, Sam's Club. You can pick up a 4-box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut puff. And if you are near a Sam's Club, you can actually get a box of 13. But if you still want to order, go to built.com. All right, once again, last segment, you're listening to the Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast. This is Rafael Barlowe with Michael Visenberg, NBA Draft Mikey V, the basketball information specialist. That sounds really important, man.
That sounds more important than it probably is.
I mean, if you're going to middle school showcases, that's pretty important.
Hey, wherever they're gonna have me, I'm happy.
I got you. Totally. I get it. All right. So all right, do you have a comparison, like, or a few players that come to mind that you think that he could project to be like?
Man, that is putting it on the spot.
Oh yeah, it's the hot seat.
As always. I don't know. The guy that I know this is kind of crazy, but DeAndre Jordan is like, at least from like, and Hassan Whiteside, I guess, would be another, like, because Hassan was shooting threes when he was in college too. Just like that kind of level of that type of body, that type of athlete. Even like a JaVale McGee, like, somebody like that. And I think there's an even higher upside of him like being a viable shooter at the NBA level. Just seeing him shoot in practice as often as I have, and just like, it's looking good. It's going in. They're working on just like the nuances and footwork with him. But yeah, like I think he could be that type of guy around the basket. But yeah, the big factor is going to be his adding strength. But I think he has the frame to certainly do that.
Now, do you think that he is just going to be a rim runner and potential floor spacer, or do you think that there is promise for him to be a guy that you can give the ball to in a block and exploit a mismatch. Like you mentioned, he had Tiger Campbell on him, but do you think he has the footwork and skill to be able to exploit those mismatches down the road?
Yeah, that's still yet to be determined. He certainly hasn't done it a ton. Yeah, like as much like I think, as you very well know, like very few people in the NBA at the center position like really take advantage of post ups.
Yep.
And like have a really high efficiency in that position. The NBA for the most part is like moving away from that, or like trying to give it to a player like Luka Doncic or Kevin Durant who can take advantage of that. Even like an Andrew Wiggins, I know does really well in post up situations. But yeah, to me, he's more of that, like you want him as a cutter, you want him as the lob threat, and then to take advantage of like having him either as somebody that could be in the pick and roll or the pick and pop, more so than I would think being a post up kind of guy, because we just haven't seen a lot of like efficiency there so far, and he does have a tendency to kind of fade away rather than go into contact, even though his free throw rate's been pretty solid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something that I've noticed with not just him, but a lot of bigs. Like a lot of bigs don't have a hook. Like one of my pet peeves is seeing that, because I think I'm a big man myself. I think if I could like, Rasheed Wallace is like my favorite player. So, but he didn't necessarily have a hook. But I see like bigs get an offensive rebound, right? And when they get an offensive rebound, instead of like, if they can't dunk it, instead of like powering it up and just shooting a soft touch hook, it turns into like a fadeaway jumper.
Yeah.
And when it goes in, it looks good. But when it misses, you just look soft, right? You just look like you are afraid of contact and you don't want to. Yeah, you just look like you're afraid of contact and you're soft, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
All right, defensively, like, do you think that is his greatest strength and his asset that he could bring to a team?
Yeah, he seems to move pretty well there. Positioning is going to be a big factor, and like I would say just general awareness, like off ball. But yeah, he's been a really solid rim protector. Block rate really high. And like can do some stuff from the weak side as well. Not amazing when you put him on smaller players. I think that was one of the reasons why his fit at power forward was not ideal. But he is somebody that like certainly has a lot of tools there, and certainly has some timing as a shot blocker. You'd like to see him be a better defensive rebounder, and I think that's something that he's been focusing on lately. Just like I noticed that the box outs are a lot more solid, and he's been even like drawing like over the back fouls just by being in the right position and focusing on those fundamentals.
All right, this is kind of like a two-part question. What team do you think would be the best fit for him? And do you think that the motor, and to me, that's like the biggest question mark about him. Nobody's ever denied his talent. It's always consistently is the motor. Do you think that's something that can be fixed or brought out of him? Or do you think he would need like the perfect situation where he has like, and this is just an example, like a Chris Paul type guard that is going to be in his ear and that knows how to make sure that he is getting his touches?
I really do not know the answer to like if somebody can fix his motor. I'm somebody that usually gives prospects a lot of the times, as far as that's concerned, like the benefit of the doubt, especially if they have physical talent. But yeah, that's going to be just something that I think teams are going to really need to figure out themselves. I think even like I went to the Mavericks Blazers game tonight. I think him playing with a guy like Luka Doncic would be really good for him.
Yep.
I think that like it would be nice to have some veteran leadership and some people like obviously have like a great point guard or have a great facilitator that knows how to get him the ball in the right situations. Or even a Golden State. Like I just think that would be really interesting. Like, you know, he's not James Wiseman, of course, but like he's somebody that you could get for a lot cheaper who does like maybe quite a few of the same things.
Yep.
While having like that physical talent. Yeah, man, like I just think that he's a really interesting in terms of that ability to possibly stretch the floor. Even somebody that you need to worry about like in mid-range. Like I wouldn't call him like a 3-level scorer and don't think he's going to be taking tons of those shots. And I know NBA teams don't want him probably taking tons of those shots, but he's done really well with touch shots. Yep. It's just kind of been the strength around the basket that's led to, I think, his low shooting percentage thus far.
What about Portland in a developmental role?
I would really like it. Yeah. I would think it would be cool. Like I just does a lot of those things and then like has that greater potential as I'd say a defensive presence, as a rim protector. Yeah, the Blazers have like some kind of cool young pieces right now. Like Shaedon looks really good. Jabari Walker, like in his minutes, has been solid.
Can never question his motor.
Yeah.
V12
would be somebody like great to take Kel'el under his wing too.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much. Where can the listeners find you and your work?
At NBA Draft Mikey V is my Twitter, and then www.perspectiveinsight.com _Pro Insight for our Twitter and our Instagram. Had a lot of great stuff happening just before the end of the new year. We have a YouTube channel as well, so if you want to check out the Perspective Insight YouTube, have a lot of interviews, including one with Kel'el Ware that we did very recently after the Utah game, and where I think he had a couple 3-pointers in that one. And then recently got to see this would be a player who I think could help Oregon right now, but if he wanted to be stay for another year, they're getting a point guard named Jackson Shelstad, who I think is a possible McDonald's All-American and should at least be in contention, if not on the team, and is somebody that's going to help Oregon right away. Had one of the best Decembers I've seen a high school player have in beating national teams. So wanted to give him a shout out. And shout out to N'Faly Dante too, who I think is like greatly helped his stock and just had a fantastic game against Arizona, and Oumar Ballo and Azuolas Tubelis.
Shout out to Leonard Miller, who's always representing Pro Insight.
Heck yes. Big shout out to Leonard.
Every time I've seen him, he has a Pro Insight shirt on. I saw him in Vegas when they played Wembanyama, and then every time like I follow like the G League site and they show like the G League fits, he always has a Pro Insight shirt.
Love Leonard. Yeah, we got him his own Pro Insight shirt with his logo on the side. So yeah, Leonard's definitely a guy that we really like.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, check out the Game to Game podcast. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow the Game to Game podcast on the Locked On NBA channel, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, this is Rafael Barlowe, NBA Draft Mikey V.